Lead a life of entrepreneurial freedom with insights from successful creatives, entrepreneurs, and investors. Discover how they overcame challenges and turned their biggest dreams into reality. They share their personal success playbook so you can build the business and life you truly want. Welcome to Passion Millionaire, the podcast by Robert Roth. Rock and roll your dreams.
Welcome to today's episode of the Passion Millionaire Podcast. I'm excited as always. Today we have our first attorney on this show with great insights because she is not only in my favorite city in the world, she is in Miami and she is specialized in commercial litigation. So it means she works with seven-figure companies and above and helps them get the money if there would be outstanding invoices, money that is owed, but the company doesn't know how to get that money in because the people just don't want to pay. So Jane Muir is helping to fix this issue, and she's even received an award that was in 2015 for being the most productive lawyer, and she's received this reward from the Florida bar. So welcome, Jane Muir. Let us know how you got there.
Oh, thank you, Robert, for having me. I'm so honored to be on your podcast, and I'm passionate about everything that you and your audience are working on and building to generate a wonderful business for themselves and to do good in the community. How did I get there? Well, I really always wanted to be an attorney, and it partly came from being a part of a family of attorneys. My mother was a judge for 35 years in Miami-Dade County, 11th Judicial Circuit. And my father is a lawyer, and he's still practicing, almost 80 years old. And my grandfather was an attorney before him, and so on, going back 6 generations.
Wow.
So it's really kind of our family business. So I just knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I was on the debate team in high school. I did everything I could to learn skills to be a better lawyer when I eventually got admitted to the bar in 2009. And around that time was the subprime mortgage crisis. So the jobs were pretty scarce. And as a result of getting laid off, I ended up starting my own firm with my trial partner from law school. And after a few years together, he ended up going to become a public defender. But after several other partners, eventually I've been building my own firm, which is now a 7-figure firm.
Yeah, congratulations to that. I totally forgot to say that you have built yourself your own firm into the 7 figures, which is a real achievement. So that's quite awesome. I'm really excited to learn. Like if I put myself in the shoes of a company that now has sent an invoice to somebody, maybe even way too long ago, tried to receive their money. Let's say it's $50K, just to put an example out there. The invoice is not being paid, right? What happens next? Like if I would contact you, maybe you can turn this in a real life example, right? That you have solved. Give us a real life example. Like why can you solve that when the business owner cannot solve that, and how does that work? And does the whole money come back typically? Give us a real life example about that.
Absolutely. That is really our most common scenario that we work with. And exactly what happens is what you described. Someone has either a major account receivable, like over $100,000, or they have many small accounts receivable, like 2,000 here, 5,000 there, 6,000 there, and they add up to a lot of money. And around the time when you're about to crack $1 million is when the business owner is starting to kind of drown, and they feel like, they just keep their head above water because they're still doing too much in the company. They haven't quite figured out how to delegate out the work. And so they're starting to feel the pain by discovering these kinds of problems, like a major account receivable. And this usually happens when the accountant says, you've got a lot of outstanding revenue that hasn't been accrued. Where is this revenue? What are you going to do? And what usually happens is the owner will finally step in after different lower level administrators have been calling the clients or the customers to get them to pay.
Mhm.
And the owner calls the people and says, you owe me this money. Can you just pay me? We need it. We need to make payroll. We need to pay our rent. And the debtors will either deny they owe the amount or admit that they owe the amount and kind of try to postpone it.
Mhm.
And it may have been over a year that this amount is been due. So what we tend to see is kind of the frustration of the owner. Like, I need this money. I am owed this money. I earned it. And they're just not giving it to me. So
Yep.
what we do is, first of all, we assess whether it's worthwhile to pursue. And in order to figure that out, we identify how much is at issue and whether the opposing party has money to pay it. And so we often will run a background check to assess the assets of this debtor so that we know that if we win, it's not just going to be a piece of paper that is worthless. We want to be able to sell something like a piece
Yep.
of land or a boat or a plane or something that has tangible value that could fill that amount that you've lost. So
Mhm.
if we have the ability to collect, then the next thing we do is we send a letter. And sometimes the letter is enough to just scare someone into paying because a lawyer wrote
Yep.
it.
Mhm.
But in our firm, we have a policy where we will only write a letter for someone who genuinely wants to sue the person if they don't get any feedback.
Mhm.
And the reason is, I'm sure you know the story of the boy who cried wolf.
Um, Not sure. Maybe once you tell it, maybe you can give that metaphor real quick.
Yes, there was a shepherd who wanted to get some attention from his neighbors, and he
Mhm.
knew that if he cried wolf, that all the neighbors would come with their weapons to l- protect the sheep. And so he
Ah, okay.
wolf, wolf, and the neighbors all come, but there's no wolf, and he thinks it's so funny, and he laughs and rolls on the ground, and the
Yeah.
townspeople all go home.
Yep.
And so a few weeks go by, he decides he's going to do it again. Wolf, wolf. And they all come out. He laughs. He thinks it's so funny. They all go home. But then a few weeks go by and a real wolf is there. And
Yep.
the wolf is threatening him and the sheep. And he cries wolf, and none of the townspeople come to help him. And he ends up being eaten by the wolf. And so the moral of the story
Yep.
is, you only cry for help when you genuinely need it, or else when you need it, it won't be there. So
Yep. Right.
with that lesson in my mind, I send letters only when I am genuinely going to take legal action.
Yep. That makes
So
total sense to me.
I'm glad you see it that way. And then what we can do after, if the person doesn't immediately say, okay, we'll pay, or enter a payment plan or some kind of thing, which rarely happens, to be honest. It may be 1% of the time when people get a letter, they call me and they say, I didn't mean for this to happen, and here's the money. So the majority of the time we end up filing a lawsuit. And so
Okay.
when we file a lawsuit, what's great about that is that it forces the other party to get a lawyer or
Mm,
to defend themselves in court.
mm,
And just the act of having to pay a lawyer might be enough to get them to pay my client.
mhm.
But long term, often these things will end up in a settlement. 99% of cases end up in settlement, a-
Okay.
all because of the leverage that you gain from paying for legal fees
Yep.
and the other side being forced to pay their own legal fees.
Mhm.
So So that is the very simple process of collecting money through a lawsuit.
Yeah, quite interesting. So I'd be curious, like typically what needs to be the size of money to be collected so that it even makes sense to talk to you? I mean, you have mentioned could be 100,000, for example, but what is the minimum and what is maybe also on the other end, the biggest one that you have managed so far?
Well, I think that the jurisdictional limit for circuit court is $50,000. So since in our firm, we've done an analysis of all the lawsuits we've handled over the 18 years I've been practicing law.
Mhm.
And amongst all those lawsuits, the average fees have been $50,000.
That's the
And
average.
that's
Okay. Hmm.
regardless of the size of the case, regardless of the amount in
Uh,
controversy. So if you've lost 50,000 and you can gain 50,000, since that's a wash,
yeah.
we think that that's kind of not worth pursuing
Yeah.
unless you have a provision in an agreement that says you can recover your fees if you're successful, because
Hmm.
then you can regain that 50,000 that
How
you
would you
lost.
get that?
Well, you'd want it in a contract.
Uh-huh. Okay. So you only have that or you don't have it,
Right.
basically in this moment, right?
Right.
Hmm.
And in Florida, we follow what's called the American rule. In other jurisdictions, like in Britain, for instance, when you win a lawsuit, you get your fees and costs automatically. So there's a lot of litigation that's initiated because people know that they can win back their fees. And in the United States, typically you cannot win back your fees unless the statute says that you can, or you have an agreement that says that you can. So we hope that there's some language that says that you can recuperate your fees if you prevail. And if they don't have that, then the first thing we do is advise them to update their contracts so that they will be able to recover their fees in the future.
So basically, to everybody who is listening, there is a way to avoid this in the first place, or at least increase your chances, the way I'm understanding, in case you have too much money, outstanding money piling up, and you're worried about producing more and more of this problem. Like, check your contracts right now. Do you have this in there? And if you're not able to check it yourself, um, maybe ask Jane to check the contracts. But I'm assuming there is probably other stuff in contracts as well that can make a difference in cases like that. So, I mean, yes, it's an investment into the future, but in case you know you have a higher likelihood for whatever reason, the way your business is structured, to have money to be collected, then that might be a good investment. On the other hand, now typically people would come to you once they have that problem. So, and then they are updating the contract, I would assume. So therefore, that's already an interesting learning. So, I mean, it only makes sense to find a lawyer and or basically hunt the money through a lawyer if you have substantially more than $50,000 that you're hopefully claiming successfully. Then, what would be the biggest amount that you have successfully claimed so far?
Well, in December, we won a jury verdict of $6.3 million. And that was the largest
Wow.
case that we've won so far. Um, we've also, some of our victories have been a zero because we defended someone
Mhm.
from an issue where they were being asked to pay.
Mhm.
And so we have a few zero victories that we're very proud of. But the splash of a $6.3 million verdict is very satisfying, and I am
Yeah,
proud of
that
that
sounds
recovery.
awesome. Maybe is there a quick story to tell? Like, how did that start? And okay, we know now kind of how it ended. And what was the, if you can call it that, profit for for
Yeah.
your client?
Well, this was a situation involving a condominium, and
Okay.
we were interviewed by the client along with a dozen other law firms, and we have our practice is about 70% corporate and commercial and 30% nonprofit. So I represent a nonprofit that helps refugees, another one that helps people departing federal criminal custody, and like what they call a halfway house. I have I have a church, I have all kinds of different nonprofits that I've represented over years. And my hobby is to work with nonprofits. Like I'm going to chair a fundraiser for the Miami-Dade County Public Libraries in November, or I am a member of a group for Irish heritage people called the South Florida Emerald Society. I'm the vice president. So it's my hobby to be involved in the community and be doing activities that are charitable. And so I also have a practice in this area. Anyway, we were interviewed by these potential clients who had evaluated the work of their condominium association under the oversight of the board. And because they were skilled in the area of construction and engineering, they could tell that the project that they were advocating for $48 million was really incorrectly done. So we filed a kind of lawsuit that is very common in corporate settings called a derivative suit, where a shareholder sues the company for misbehaving. Like Carl Icahn was famous for this kind of lawsuit in the 80s. You might have heard about this. So what you do is you sue the entity to enforce the shareholders' goals, and that's how we were able to win. And it was very complicated because Florida law relating to condominiums is extremely tricky. But we have a lawyer in my team whose area of expertise is in condominium, and she's even a licensed CAM, which is what the abbreviation for community association manager. So with her specialization and knowledge in that area, and my expertise is presenting and explaining things that are very complicated in a more simple way, we were able to explain the situation well to the court and to the jury, and we were able to win the verdict.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that sounds awesome to me. What was the profit? I'm calling it that now for
So
that company.
our fees were approximately $800,000.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
Yeah. Yes.
And
So,
I mean for the organization you have represented. Like,
well, because the verdict just happened in December, we have not seen the collection yet.
okay.
But that we're still in the post-judgment motions, which is usually a 3 to 6 month process. But we are hopeful that we will be able to recover, because the company from which we won the major part of the verdict does have a revenue in 7 figures. So we should be able to see a recovery there.
Okay. So basically they will be able to get the full amount that they should receive, or is that even more on top?
We sure hope so. And yes, it
Yep.
could be more because of the
Okay.
fact that interest applies. And
Uh-huh.
and if the longer that they delay, the longer there's interest applying. And the statutory rate of interest right now in Florida is 8.44%.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, that adds up. So yeah, that's what I was after, because I mean, that matters, right? There's somebody, in this case, Jane, it's you, taking care that, you know, the whole amount like that applies is being collected. And, maybe sometimes I could imagine, please correct me, I'd be curious what you experience, but I could imagine that maybe entrepreneurs or organizations that are looking to collect the money would maybe give in too much very often. And then when somebody like you steps in, the negotiation just works out differently. And literally there's on average a lot more money collected just because of this reason.
Well, we do two things to try and collect. One is we run asset searches on potential defendants before we sue, because we want to make sure that there's a way to get the
Okay.
money that we are seeking.
Yep.
And then the other thing is we always request the insurance during the lawsuit. so that we can see that there's some pocket to pull the money out of. So usually you get paid through either an asset being sold or some indemnity obligation like an insurance policy or some
So that's
other.
the insurance policy of that company that did not pay. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So we want to get their insurance
Mm-hmm.
policies early on in a lawsuit before we waste too much time and effort. And that helps us make sure that we can recover the actual money
Mm-hmm.
to the companies that we represent.
Interesting. Okay. So and then there's this thing called piercing the corporate veil. So that's what you're talking about also, right?
It Yes, in my $6.3 million verdict case, it doesn't work because it's a nonprofit. A condominium is a special
Mhm.
kind of entity, but sometimes we are able to pierce the corporate veil.
Mhm.
Like one case we represented a construction company that
Mhm.
had delivered a piece of heavy equipment to a mechanic here in Miami
Mhm.
and paid to have this heavy machinery fixed. And they never fixed it and they never returned the piece of heavy machinery. So we sued and we were able to win a judgment and then pierce the corporate veil because this person who was a mechanic had used money from his personal accounts.
So you mix
And
the personal funds with the business funds, and
correct,
therefore you could say we can also take your
correct,
personal stuff now, right?
correct. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of conversation in the internet amongst entrepreneurs about what a reasonable corporate structure is and how to protect yourself. And some of them are kind of overkill. Like you do not need 27 LLCs in a trust. Like
Okay.
it's perfectly acceptable to have one entity as long as it's all doing the same kind of business. And if you have too many entities, then there are administrative activities that you have to perform every year for all of them. And
Mm.
if you're not earning at least six figures in each one, it doesn't make sense to have such a burden
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to have to pay people to handle a bookkeeper, an accountant. It's it, it's enough to just have one corporate entity a lot of the time, as long as you're not, you know, moving money in and out in a sloppy way. You have to be orderly about the way you manage the money in a company, or else you could have the corporate veil pierced against you if you get sued.
Yeah, so no commingling of funds. That's the
Yeah.
point here. And so basically what you're also saying is maybe there are some people who have built a structure of multiple LLCs or whatever type of companies for the sake of protecting themselves and their assets. And therefore that wouldn't even be necessary. They might be able to restructure, have one entity that is very well structured, very well taken care of, and they would have the same effect while saving money. Or if somebody would be thinking about building something like that, that might be the way to go. Simplify everything while also saving costs.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm. Quite interesting. I would be curious, besides commingling funds, right? Um, what would be the other typical reasons for being able to actually pierce the corporate veil, if there are
Well,
any?
yes, there's another concept called an alter ego. And it's like, Bruce Wayne and Batman, and he takes off the mask and he's Bruce Wayne. Well, if you, for instance, have, let's say, for one kind of case, we see a lot of these, is where someone gets into debt and they just close the company and open a new one with a new name, and they use the same people and they use the same office location, and they do sort of everything the same, and they think they can reset by just starting over, and
Mhm.
you cannot. So the courts will enforce a judgment against company A against new company B,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the alter ego of company A. So that's another reason to pierce the corporate veil.
Mm-hmm. Quite interesting. Yeah. So, and typically, let's say somebody has a need for litigation, has a need to talk to you because there's 100,000 or more dollars to be collected. And therefore, you are doing the research if it's worth to actually go ahead, send a letter. You only would do that when you know, okay, if the person is not answering, then the court action is coming or the lawsuit basically is coming from you. So, and you do the research in order to figure out if it's worth to actually pursue. How are you able to actually, research or know the resources available? I could imagine. Um, Let me just try to take the best guess. Like some things maybe are pretty obvious, I could imagine, because maybe you look at the company website and you see, okay, there's a fleet of company trucks or some type of machinery that you could see there, or maybe you see a safe filled with gold. Okay, that's a stupid example, but so maybe obvious things by just doing simple research or social media and maybe conversations that are public that could be followed that maybe are giving away some hints, or are you taking some other measures like finding a detective and then the detective goes around and I don't know. I'd be curious, how does that work in real life? That was how this works in my mind,
Yeah,
but I have
that's
no
pretty
idea.
much right. That's pretty much right. Well, one resource we use is public record searches. So
Mhm.
there's something
Yep.
called a UCC filing,
Mhm.
which the Florida Secretary of State has a database of all of the liens that are filed against assets. So, for example, if you take out a line of credit for a restaurant,
Mhm.
usually the line of credit will have a long agreement, like many pages long, that says something to the effect that you are committing your fixtures and equipment to pay if you default. And that document gets filed with the state of Florida to
Mhm.
indicate that the lien holder, being the bank in this scenario.
They're first in line, pretty much.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. So we run a public record search. We look for liens. We look for existing judgments, because
Mhm.
if somebody already has a judgment, then they're also first in line.
Mhm.
So that's the kind of lawyer side of things. We also work with private investigators, who-
Okay.
just like you thought. And they are literally detectives, and they
Uh-huh.
find out what other assets the people might have that
Okay.
are collectible. Like in Florida, we have a rule that your personal home cannot be taken for a debt. And
Interesting. Okay.
that's one of the reasons why Florida is such an attractive place to live. We have no income tax, and we have no way to take your house. So, for example, if you remember the case of O.J. Simpson,
Mhm. Vaguely. Yeah.
okay, in the United States, it was a major news story because O.J. Simpson was a famous football player, and he was accused of having murdered his ex-wife and her romantic partner. And he was acquitted in the criminal matter in a very dramatic trial that had a team of extremely capable defense attorneys who were famous in our country. And what ended up happening is, although he was acquitted in the trial for criminal, because you have a very high burden to reach of beyond a reasonable doubt, which is like practically 100% sure something happened. In a civil trial, you only have to prove it's more likely than not. So one little tiny feather can tip the scales in one direction or the other. And so O.J. Simpson was found to be civilly liable for having caused the death of his ex-wife and her romantic partner. So he moved to Miami and bought an expensive home And that home was kind of insulating him from being able to be collected against in this civil litigation. And that is a benefit in every state, because the bankruptcy court, for instance, won't take your personal home. And that's historical, because America was founded by a lot of people running away from debts, and
Oh,
people
okay.
who had been indentured, meaning placed into involuntary servitude, like almost like slavery, to pay
That's
off their debts.
that's kind of crazy, because America is also famous now to be a country where people have a lot of debt on average, maybe more than in other countries. I don't know the statistics, but that's kind of something that has come up before in the media.
Yeah, well, a
Wow.
more positive or optimistic way to look at that is
hmm
we offer people more credit. And so with credit, it's like an investment in someone's experiment or their business, that oftentimes it grows tremendously. And if it weren't for all of the opportunities that we have in our country for building wealth and building value with the help of investment or lending,
Yep.
then we wouldn't have such innovation, I think, in our country.
I,
So
I I agree. Yeah, and then it's a matter of being able to know how to handle money that you have just received from a bank or whoever has lent it to you, or not knowing how to do that, or maybe you know how to do it, but still there was a risk that you considered, but now it became a fact, and
yeah.
that can happen as well. Yeah, I agree. I'd be curious, like the way you have explained what you're doing so far. So if or not me, but um, there's, let's say, somebody out there builds a company that wants to prevent as much as possible to be pierced by a litigator like you. Like, I am hearing a formula, so I'm trying to turn the game around. So if I would want to build a fortress against somebody like you, then um, typically, or you could check out what are ways to prevent. For example, you have some assets in your home in Florida, and then you could not touch that. Right? That was one thing. So you could
Correct.
have an insurance in that form. Also, potentially, you could maybe have some assets packed into another company that is just holding assets but not operating business. And therefore, that's a quick question, yes or no, would you have to pierce two companies in order to reach those assets, like the operating company first and then also the one that is holding the assets? So,
Yes. Yeah.
okay, well, so that would make it harder for you to collect. Then also, I hear another thing. If I wanted to make myself secure from you as much as possible, I would, if I have ideally a real use for that, also take out loans that are publicly visible, so that it would deter you, because you would think it's not worth to even pierce that company. It's going to be a loss game. And
Maybe.
therefore, that would be maybe a line of defense. Um, what else would be a line of defense? I
Well,
don't know.
another
What
one
else
that
would you add?
I would add, you can be married. Being
Okay,
married makes you very difficult to collect against, because
interesting. Why is that?
when you own assets as a couple, and hypothetically, like, for instance, I have a business and I take out a line of credit from Chase Bank.
hmm
If Chase Bank sues me personally, but all my assets are owned between myself and my husband together, then they could not take our vacation home in Colorado, or they could
Oh
not
wow.
take our bank accounts that are joint, because my husband did not sign on the document that committed to paying this line of credit. But my approach is I pay my debts. I'm like a Lannister, I always pay my debts.
Yeah.
And I believe that that is wise business practice, because I think it
Yeah.
it's a sign of integrity, really.
100%. But basically, the case that you could make now, okay, if you are an entrepreneur and you want to make sure that nobody can kind of get your assets, even if you're not paying. And basically, you're doing somebody else wrong. So that's basically the make or break point. Like for
I
me,
would
that's what you're
start
saying. Also, you want to do the right thing, basically,
correct.
in your
Start
life.
with
But
doing
there
the
are
right
people
thing.
there are people like that who don't care about it, maybe, or for whatever reason. So that would be the married person and has a home in Florida and has additional um, uh, LLCs or whatever where they pack their assets and they have loans on their operational company. So that would be kind of the end boss for somebody like you. I'm assuming that basically never happens. So probably the typical company that litigation you would take action for is like, or how many times have you seen a case like this that gets
Well,
close to this?
let me give you a little simpler explanation. So
Okay.
if you're trying to protect yourself,
Hmm.
then step one is create a corporate entity, keep the financials organized, have a bookkeeper, have an accountant, and and treat people with respect and dignity. And generally, that's great protection. Like people just will treat you well. But if you get a contract with these people, because there is a bell curve of human behavior, and
Hmm.
the bell curve it describes every quality, including morality, including integrity, including attention to detail. And so, if you have a contract, then you will be protect yourself further because the contract will define clearly what your rights and obligations are.
Hmm.
So step 3 is have a contract, and step 4
Yep.
is have insurance. Because if, God forbid, you do get sued,
Hmm.
you want insurance to cover it, not your personal assets. And
Hmm.
then step 5 is settle the case
Hmm.
before you have to try the case. So I only try cases when my client is 100% sure they're right
Hmm.
and they are clear on the risks. Like one case I tried, I defended a lady who was practically judgment proof. And that's what we call what you're describing, Robert. The A judgment proof person only has like a pension and a homestead property.
Hmm.
And like
So
this lady,
pension cannot be taken away as well. That's what I'm hearing.
correct,
Uh-huh.
correct. So she was judgment proof, meaning any judgment that could be won against her would be worthless because any assets she had would not be reachable by collection efforts.
Hmm.
So we were confident to try a case and we ended up winning a 0 verdict, even though we had lost a partial judgment on liability
Okay.
for summary judgment
Yep.
because the jury could see that the plaintiff was kind of a bad guy and he had pretty much gotten in a disagreement with the father of his or the mother of his children over his drug abuse and accused my client of having disclosed his drug addiction status to the mother of his child. And the jury saw it differently and told us after the case was over that the way they saw it was that this plaintiff was trying to take advantage.
Yeah.
So,
Like a
but
malicious intent.
exactly.
Okay.
But since my client was judgment proof, we could take the risk and go forward to a jury trial. And
Interesting.
fortunately, we won. So,
Hmm.
but if you don't have yourself in a judgment proof scenario, like all your funds are owned as a married couple, or all your funds and assets are in trust, is another way to protect them, then settle the case before you have a judgment against you. And by the way, 99% plus of cases end in settlement because nobody likes to go to the end of the case and risk losing 100%.
Yep. Expensive. Wow,
Yeah.
that's quite interesting. I think this taking this other perspective, I'd be curious, is that something that the clients that you're working with in order to, litigate, get their money back, is that something that they also have in mind to at the same time figure out how to get proof how did you call that now? Judgment proof?
Judgment proof.
Judgment proof.
Yeah.
How to become judgment proof as well as part of maybe a second or third step of working with you, or are they literally only always looking in the one direction because like they are handling things well, like morally right, and taking care of their obligations, and they hopefully never get this case, but maybe there's also ways to end up in situations without, I don't know, malicious intent, or because like something totally went wrong, even if you try to handle everything right. Is that something that comes up in your practice as well, or is it literally only litigation side, and let's prevent those things in the future by setting up the contract so you'll be able to get more of your money in the future, etc.
Well, in the prevention part of that cycle that you're describing, we usually conduct an audit of our clients' operations to
Mhm.
see what risk areas they have that we can shore up.
Yep.
So for it's usually a major account receivable or a dispute about equity or a bad contract that leads someone to us. But then once they've met us and they feel like they need to kind of tweak and improve their operations in this legal sense because they can see now why they need it. It's hard to see at first because we're so optimistic when we start a business. We think I'll never have a problem. I get along with everybody. I can always resolve everything. But the way I explain it to people is there is always one unreasonable party in a litigation because two reasonable parties will come to a resolution.
To an
They'll sign
agreement,
it out.
right? Yeah, yeah,
They'll move on. They'll keep going. But
yep.
like I said, there's a bell curve of human behavior, and reasonableness is on the bell curve too. So you've got half the
What does that
population.
mean? I mean, I know what a bell curve is, but being
The
on the
be-
bell curve too, what does it mean?
yes, what I mean by that is every human quality is
Ah,
measurable along the bell curve.
now I get it. I was having the number two in my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, ignore.
Imagine your height, your
Yep,
intelligence, your morale, all of
yep.
these things. 50% of the population is lower in reasonableness and
Yep.
50% are higher. And that's what I always explain to people because they come to me and they're like, how can this happen?
Mhm.
And I'm like, remember, half of all of humanity is over here on the bad side.
Yep.
And that's why movies like Star Wars and books like Harry Potter are so appealing to us because there is this kind of dichotomy
Mhm.
along the bell curve. And that's, I think, why we have conflict
Yeah,
is
wow. Yeah.
that's my personal theory of life, the universe, and everything. But in any case, when we audit a company, we
Mhm.
look for these problems and we try to prevent them and regularly, routinely review to see if there are any risks that are popping up. Because if you have a contract and you have insurance, then that problem is likely to be resolved for you
Yep.
without ever getting past the corporate veil, ever getting to your spouse's assets or ever even giving you one moment of restlessness and inability to sleep. Like, because
Mhm.
people who start companies, we care. We are passionate, right? We built this.
Right.
And you will stay up at night just agonizing about what do I do? This person is just not cooperating and they should cooperate. And I have no idea why they won't. And so what we do here is we enforce your rights and make people cooperate by
Yep.
creating a structure that we can demand cooperation.
Makes total sense to me. Wow, Shane, thank you for all of those insights, those stories. And I mean, I feel I've learned a lot. And I believe before I'm asking you the very last questions, very important for everybody to know what's the best way to reach out to you.
Oh, well, thank you. We have our website is miamibusiness.law. And You can find all of our contact information there, details on all of our lawyers and their backgrounds. And we offer a 30-minute consultation to discuss any legal problem at all and what we recommend, even if it's to direct you to a different attorney. I'm fortunate to have served as the president of the Miami-Dade Bar, and I'm on the board. It's the group that represents all 20,000 lawyers in Miami-Dade County. So if I don't know about a practice area, odds are I have a good idea of the best people to talk to about it. So if you have a legal problem that is in Florida or has a nexus in Florida, give us a call and we'll do our best to give you good guidance.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you very much. We're making sure to also link that in the show notes. So it's an easy click away to get in touch with you. So therefore, my last question, what is the number one mistake that you see that companies make when it comes to preventing getting into a situation where you need a litigator?
I would say the number one mistake is both no contract or a terrible contract.
Okay. All right. So check your contract. Thanks so much, Jane Muir. See you soon.
Go to rockandrollyourdreams.com/podcast.